Punks vs. Zombies by Jon Cronshaw. Episode 52. The final episode. Chapter 120. The rotor blades droned through the cabin as Tommy and Roxy soared over the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. They had been flying for what felt like hours, the monotony of the endless blue, broken only by the occasional ship. Tommy pressed his face against the window, his eyes straining to make out anything on the horizon. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Approaching the destination, ETA, 10 minutes. Tommy straightened in his seat. He glanced over at Roxy, who was already peering back out the window. A dark shape emerged on the horizon, rising out of the water. Tommy squinted, trying to make out the details. "It's an oil rig," Roxy said. "That's where they're taking us?" Tommy didn't answer, his mind racing. The rig loomed larger as they drew closer, a massive structure of steel and concrete rising from the ocean. It was like an island, a fortress in the middle of nowhere, with cranes and derricks jutting into the sky, surrounded by a network of platforms and walkways, with helicopters and boats docked at various points. The helicopter began its descent, circling the rig. People moved about on the various decks, tiny figures going about their duties. "Look at all this," Roxy said. "It's like a goddamn city." Tommy nodded, his eyes wide as he tried to take it all in. The helicopter touched down on a designated helipad, with a gentle bump. The door slid open, and a rush of salty ocean air filled the cabin. Tommy and Roxy unbuckled their harnesses and stepped out, squinting against the brightness of the midday sun reflected off the metal surfaces of the rig. A young military officer approached them, his hand extended in welcome. "Mr. Merrill, Ms. Delano, welcome to Poseidon Base." Tommy shook his hand, still trying to process everything he was seeing. "I didn't know places like this still existed. I thought everything was gone, that it was just Mad Max out there." The officer nodded. "It's a common reaction. But as you can see, we've managed to keep some semblance of order, of normalcy. This rig is part of a network of safe zones, places where survivors can live in relative safety while we work to clear and secure the mainland." Roxy stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "And how's that going, huh? The mainland, I mean. Last we saw it was overrun, the cities, the towns, all of it. I won't lie to you, we are fighting a war. The infected are everywhere, but those behind it have been neutralized. We're making progress. Slowly but surely. We're taking back what's ours." He gestured for them to follow him, leading them away from the helipad and into the heart of the rig. "We have a fully equipped medical center. There are schools for the children, gardens, and hydroponics bays to grow our own food. We even have a desalination plant to provide fresh water." Children played under the watchful eyes of adults, their laughter carrying on the salt-tinged breeze. People tended to communal gardens. Others went about maintenance tasks, repairing and reinforcing the rig's structures. "How many people live here?" Roxy asked. "Several thousand at last count. We've taken in survivors from all along the East Coast. You'll get to meet many of them soon. But for now, let's get you settled in." He led them to a large modular building near the center of the rig. The word administration stenciled on the side in crisp, military lettering. Inside, they were processed by a team of staff, their names and details entered into a database, their fingerprints and retinal scans taken for identification. Then, finally, they were shown to their quarters. Tommy tried to stifle his surprise when the officer leading them stopped outside a block labeled Couples Quarters. Tommy opened his mouth to protest, to explain that he and Roxy weren't like that, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the fear of being separated from her, or maybe it was just the bone-deep exhaustion, the need for any kind of comfort and familiarity in this strange new world. Whatever the reason, he held his tongue as the officer handed them each a keycard and showed them inside. The room was small but clean, with a double bed, a desk, and built-in storage. Tommy stood awkwardly in the middle of the floor, unsure of what to do with himself. Roxy offered him a smile. "It's okay, Tommy. We'll figure it out." He nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. They took turns in the small attached bathroom, washing away the grime and sweat of the journey. When he emerged, clean and dressed in a fresh set of clothes provided by their hosts, he found Roxy sitting on the edge of the bed. "You all right?" he asked, settling beside her. Something wrong? She shrugged, not meeting his gaze. Everything. Nothing. It's a lot to take in, you know? This place, these people. It's not what I expected. Tommy huffed a laugh. Yeah, I know what you mean. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. But what if it doesn't? She turned to face him. What if this is real? If this is actually a chance for something better? What if we can actually have a life here? I think we can make it work. Tommy stared at her. He wanted so badly to believe it, to embrace the possibility of a future beyond mere existence. But the faces of the lost rose in his mind. His friends, his family, everyone. I don't know, Rox. I don't know if I'm ready for that. If I can ever be ready. Not after everything that's happened. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. Her skin was soft, her grip warm. I know. Believe me. I feel it too. But we can't carry that weight forever. We have to find a way to live with it. To keep going. I need it to mean something. He closed his eyes, letting her words wash over him. She was right. They owed it to the ones they'd lost to make their sacrifices mean something. Otherwise, what was the point? But it was hard. So hard to imagine a life beyond the unrelenting struggle for survival, beyond the daily grind of scavenging and fighting and running, and just staying alive. A chime sounded, startling them both. Tommy looked up to see a small screen set into the wall flashing with a message. Attention new arrivals. Please report to the main auditorium for orientation at 1600 hours. Attendance is mandatory. Roxy sighed, releasing his hand and standing. Guess that's our cue. Time to go see what our brave new world has in store for us. Chapter 121. Tommy and Roxy found seats near the back of the auditorium, settling in among a dozen or so other new arrivals. A broad-shouldered man in a crisp military uniform strode out onto the stage, his gaze sharp and assessing. Good afternoon. I am Colonel Gonzalez, the commanding officer of this facility. On behalf of myself and all the brave men and women who serve here, I want to welcome you to Poseidon Base. The colonel began to pace. I know you all have questions, concerns. You've been through hell to get here, seen and experienced things no one should have to. But I want to assure you, you're safe now. A ripple of applause swept over the auditorium. This base, this community is a haven, a place where we can rebuild and reclaim what was lost. He gestured to the screens behind him, which flared to life with images of the rig. Here, we have everything we need to not just survive, but thrive. Food, water, medical care, education for our children, work, and purpose for our adults. It is our chance to rebuild. The images changed, showing scenes of the mainland, of cities and towns overrun by zombies, of desolate highways and burned-out homes. But we cannot do it alone. Out there, beyond the safety of these walls, the world is still in chaos. The threat of the infected remains. His gaze swept the room, his expression grave. That is why we need you. Each of you has skills, knowledge, experience that is vital to our mission. Whether you were a doctor or a teacher, a soldier or a mechanic, a parent or a student, you have value. You have purpose. The screens shifted again, now displaying lines of text, lists, and organizational charts. Tomorrow, you will be interviewed and assigned to your new roles, your new duties. Some of you will work in the greenhouses or the kitchens, helping to feed our population. Others will assist in the medical center, or the schools, or the workshops. And some of you, those with the necessary aptitude and ability, will join our security forces, helping to protect and defend this base and all who live here. Tommy shifted in his seat. The thought of taking up arms again, of fighting and killing, made his stomach churn. Beside him, Roxy tensed, her hand finding his and squeezing tight. I know this is a lot to take in, the colonel said, but I want you to know that you are not alone. We are all in this together, all working towards the same goal, a future where our children can grow up safe and free, where we can rebuild what was lost and make it better than before. He straightened, his eyes blazing. It will not be easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, moments where it all seems hopeless, but we will persevere, because we must, because the alternative is unthinkable. With a final nod, he stepped back from the podium. Thank you for your attention. You will be assessed for your assignments in the morning. Use this evening to think about what you can bring to our community, your skills, your specialisms. Until then, get some rest, take some time to explore your new home, and welcome, once again, to Poseidon Base. As the colonel left the stage and others began to disperse, Roxy turned to him. I don't like this. It feels too perfect, too easy, like they're selling us a dream, but not telling us the whole truth. Tommy nodded. I know, but what choice do we have? We can't go back, not now. We have to give this a chance. She sighed, leaning into him. I know, I have a bad feeling about this place. We'll figure it out, Rox. But for now, let's just try to get through tonight, okay? She nodded, and together they sat, watching as the last of the other new arrivals trickled out of the auditorium, until they were alone. What now, Tommy? He shrugged. We wait it out and see what comes next. For the first time in a long time, we don't have to run anymore. He reached for her hand, twining his fingers with hers and giving a squeeze. The contact grounded him, a physical reminder that they were here, together, alive against all odds. Roxy shifted closer, wrapping her arms around him in a warm embrace. Tommy responded in kind, pulling her close and resting his chin on the top of her head. They sat like that for a long time, just holding each other. At least we're safe here, right? That's something. Tommy nodded, his eyes closing as he let himself feel the truth of those words. Safe. It was a concept that had seemed so foreign, so unattainable for so long. Yeah, it's more than we dared hope for, at times. Tommy's mind drifted to Neve and Sean, to Layla and Mickey and all the others who hadn't made it. Their faces rose in his mind, so clear and vivid it was almost as if they were standing right in front of him. But he pushed the images down, forced himself to focus on the present, on the warmth of Roxy in his arms, and the steady thrum of the rig all around them. They had survived, but he couldn't hold on to a past that no longer existed. They had a chance, however slim, at something more than mere survival. We've got an opportunity here, Rox, a chance to figure out what living means now. It won't be easy, and it won't be the same as before, but it's something. It's a start. Roxy pulled back slightly to look at him, her eyes shining. I know, and I want that, Tommy. I want it so badly it hurts, but I'm so damn scared. Scared of losing this, of losing you. Scared that this is all just another false hope. Tommy cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. I'm scared too. Terrified, if I'm being honest. But we can't let that fear control us. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. You're right. I know you are. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. But we have to try. Roxy nodded, a small tentative smile curving her lips. Tommy gazed into her eyes, seeing a reflection of his own fears, hopes, and determination. In that moment, he felt a shift within himself, a letting go of the past, and an embracing of what lay ahead. Rox, we've been through hell together. You've been my rock, my constant. I don't know if I would have made it this far without you. Tommy, let me finish. I've been holding on to ghosts, onto a life that doesn't exist anymore. Neve, Sean, they're gone. And it kills me to say that, to really accept it. But I have to. For my sake. For our sake. He took a deep breath as he cupped Roxy's face. I love you, Roxy. I think I have for a long time, but I was too scared to admit it, too guilty to let myself feel it. But life's too short, too precious to waste on fear and guilt. Whatever comes next, whatever challenges we face here, I want to face them with you. Roxy's smile lit up her entire face. I love you too, so much, and I'll be here, always, no matter what comes our way. Tommy leaned in, his lips meeting hers. He lost himself in the moment, the passion. It was a promise, a new beginning, a defiance against the darkness that had consumed their world. As they broke apart, Tommy rested his forehead against hers. So, what do you say? Ready to build a new life here? Together? Roxy nodded. I guess we should go back to the room. Tommy got to his feet and smiled. We definitely should. She reached out, taking his hand once more. We're going to be okay, Tommy. We're going to make this work. He nodded, squeezing her fingers. I know we will. Chapter 122. Later that day, Tommy and Roxy entered the mess hall, the chatter of refugees filling the air. What do you think, Rox? Should I order the lobster or the filet mignon tonight? Roxy snorted, elbowing him in the ribs. Oh, definitely the lobster. And make sure to ask for a side of caviar, too. They grinned at each other. As they inched forward in the line, Tommy scanned the room, taking in the faces. And then he saw them. Niamh and Sean standing further ahead in the queue, a tall, broad-shouldered man beside them. Tommy dropped his tray. The clatter of plastic on concrete drawing glances from nearby diners. Roxy followed his gaze. Is that... Tommy nodded, unable to speak. He stared at them, drinking in the sight of his partner and son, alive and whole. They looked different, thinner, but they were here. They were safe. He took a step forward, then another, his feet carrying him towards them. Niamh! His voice cracked. Sean! Niamh turned, her brow furrowing. Then her eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. Tommy? Oh my God, Tommy! She ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck, her breath hitching in a sob. Tommy held her tight, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't care. She was here in his arms. Nothing else mattered. Niamh pulled back, her hands cupping his face as she searched his eyes. I can't believe it. We didn't know if you'd made it, if you were... Tommy shook his head, his throat too tight to speak. He looked past her to where Sean stood, clinging to the leg of the tall man beside him. Sean peered out at Tommy, his expression wary, uncertain. Niamh followed his gaze. Sean, sweetheart, it's okay, it's your dad. But Sean only burrowed deeper into the man's side, his small hands clutching at his legs. The man laid a gentle hand on the boy's head. Tommy felt a rush of jealousy, hot and bitter in his throat. He turned to Niamh, a question in his eyes. She sighed. This is Chad. He's been with us since Philly. He helped us get here, kept us safe. Tommy nodded, forcing a smile onto his face. Thank you, he said, extending a hand to the other man. For taking care of them. I can't tell you how much that means to me. Chad took his hand, his grip firmer than was comfortable. Of course. They're good people. They didn't deserve being abandoned. There was a heavy silence hanging in the air between them. Then Roxy stepped forward, her hand finding Tommy's once more. And who's she? Niamh asked. I'm Roxy. I've been with Tommy since the beginning of all this. We've been through hell and back, let me tell you. He's been a good friend. Niamh smiled. I'm glad he had someone. I'm glad he wasn't alone. Tommy swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the floor. Not everyone made it. Layla, Mickey. We lost a lot of good people along the way. Niamh's face fell, her eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine. Roxy released Tommy's hand. We all lost people, but we're here now. We're safe. That's what matters. Sean suddenly let go of Chad's leg and ran to Tommy, throwing his arms around his waist. Daddy, you came back. Tommy dropped to his knees, gathering his son into his arms, holding him tight. I'll always come back, buddy. Always. They stayed like that for a long moment, the rest of the world falling away until it was just the two of them, father and son, reunited at last. Then Tommy stood, Sean's hand clutched tight in his own, and they rejoined the others in the meal line. There was so much to say, so much to catch up on, but for now it was enough just to be together, to know that they had all made it. As they took their trays and found a table, Tommy couldn't help but smile. So much had changed, so much had been lost, but they were still standing, still fighting, still holding on to hope in the face of unimaginable darkness. He looked around at Niamh, her eyes sparkling as she watched Sean chatter excitedly to Roxy. Chad, his expression guarded, and Roxy, his friend, his anchor. Whatever lay before them, they were a family. They had seen the worst of humanity, had stared into the abyss and come out the other side. But in that moment, everything had changed. There were still so many questions, so many uncertainties, but for now those questions could wait. For now there was only this moment. They would rebuild, and they would heal. Punks to the end. The end. I hope you enjoyed Punks vs. Zombies as much as I enjoyed writing it. You can support my work on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/Jon Cronshaw author. Here you'll get access to exclusive stories and gain early access to my works in progress. Punks vs. Zombies is copyright 2024 by Jon Cronshaw. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. All people, names, businesses, and places are works of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious way.